Right. And on our next agenda item, I'll touch on some of the water conservation stuff real briefly, not really the scope of this commission, but it all kind of ties in.
Sounds like a good thing for a new ad hoc committee. Just kidding. Just a few more questions. I'm almost done, I promise. Slow streets. So page 4. Last sentence, excuse me. Staff are working with the existing consultant team. I'm guessing that means Alta.
Yes.
To establish a revised scope to complete work in 2022. So I wanted to ask for clarification, and because I know there are a couple of different facets to slow streets, residential and mission, and then there's a traffic study that I don't think we've seen yet, which relates to the mission piece. I'm wondering if there is a way to maybe move forward more quickly with one aspect of it, for example, the residential, while the mission street, which might be a bit longer to design and implement, works its way through the system. Okay, I'm done.
Yes, that's our plan. So in re-engaging with the previous consulting team, the idea would be that we implement the residential section right away. But there's some larger questions to be answered, which is why I mentioned seeking recommendations from MTech about the commercial mission section, not only about finishing up the design and reviewing the traffic study by Iteris, but also taking the opportunity now to think about what the long-term goals for the Slow Streets program would be. For example, if we foresee this as being a one day, a permanent installation of modifying and reconfiguring Mission Street, which it seems like there's broad appeal for doing something like that. Perhaps in this temporary installation, we'll want to consider extending it a little bit longer, changing the outreach element of it in terms of the locality of each little pocket of implementation. And that changes like what type of materials we're going to use, because if we're going to have it on a little longer, what type of removal, what's the deconstruction plan, like removing the materials from the street. So there's a few things to consider that are that lean more towards the policy side of finishing the project that we'll want some advisement on before taking that contract to council, because the contract will be sizable enough that we'll have to get council approval for it. They've already appropriated the budget, but we have to approve a contract with the vendor.
So are they doing anything as we sit here on either residential or commercial, or no?
No, the only thing they're doing as we sit here is preparing a proposal that you'll see hopefully very soon that will discuss this subjective to move forward.
Okay, and so just to be clear, so the approach is to try to get the residential accomplished shorter term. And I know we had provided some feedback several months ago with their initial design. So I'm assuming what we're talking about is they have to incorporate those comments and come back with a proposal for the residential to implement, and then also be working on the commercial. Does that sound right? Or?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, our thought was that the residential is pretty much done. Yeah. And
I think there were some things missing.
Yeah.
We'd asked them to review. So I just want to make sure that
they would basically pick it up where they left off. And the Mission Street would look a little different than it was intended last year, because now it's a different scenario. We don't have to finish the project by December 31st. We do want to finish it in 2022, sooner than later, but yeah, it's a different dynamic for the commercial side of it, but the residential, there's really no change. It's just wrapping it up.
So do you have a plan on when you will go back to council with this contract proposal from Malta to get them?
Yeah, I mean, we'd like to do this before the end of the fiscal year. So sometime, since it's almost May, in the next 2 months. So our hope is to be back at MTech next month with this. And then the council. So
because you have to deal with both at the same time, the residential and the commercial.
Right. I mean, if we're gonna, we could separately contract the residential, but it would, we would
It's more efficient to do them at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, especially the way we're planning to contract this.
Sure.
I mean,
Okay.
we're not going to, the plan was not to seek a whole new scenario, but to utilize what was done previously. And so
Yeah.
there's a contracting methodology to pulling the existing team back on board.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you.
Perfect. Yes.
So a couple of these talk about, like the timing improvements ones talk about staff working to implement an on-call professional services contract for traffic engineering, on-call maintenance services contract for signal maintenance and adjustment, which is great. I'm wondering, we have a sense of where we are there, timing wise?
Sure. So for signal maintenance, we have been working with a contractor for years. But a contractor was not in place. And
Siemens, right?
yes, Siemens, which is it's like Siemens / Unix. So we're trying to pay backdated invoices for the last couple of years and catch up on the necessary required maintenance work so that we can move on to both preventative maintenance and then the changes to the system that we'd like to see implemented. So there's a little bit ways to go with the signal maintenance contract. As far as the professional services work, we at Public Works, we've gathered a whole bunch of different professional services needs we have across the department. And we've been writing an RFQ, which is basically ready. There's a couple things left to do to release it. We keep thinking we're gonna release that every week. So hopefully this is the week to release it. And then we'll have a few weeks for some consultants to respond. So we're hoping to have that in place in May also, on-call professional services.
Okay. I just didn't quite understand what you said, the first part of what you said, which was that we can't look to signal timing adjustments until we do these other things. And I didn't quite understand that.
Well, I guess I'll put it this way. We don't have a current signal maintenance contract. We should. We still have maintenance needs in the city. The contractor is helping us with those maintenance needs because they're important. We haven't asked them to do any sort of other type of signal adjustments because we don't have a contract with them. They're simply helping us because we need their help. There's no requirement for them to do that, where we have no agreement. So what we're trying to do is fix that situation, put a contract in place so that we can make requests like you're talking about with timing adjustments.
Okay. So is that a matter of putting a proposed contract together and getting council approval, or is it?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is there one that we have currently? I know it's expired or something like term, right? I mean, do we have a template that we can use to?
Yes, we do. So it's a matter of doing an RFP and then getting our responses in, and then
So we
award the
need an
contract.
RFP to do traffic signal maintenance and adjustments.
Yes, we do. It's a maintenance services type of agreement. And so we need to go through because of the size of the agreement. You don't have to go through an RFP, but because we want to implement it for several years and for such a large amount of money, it makes more sense. It's a safer bet to do it through that process.
Okay.
One thing I'll get into in our next item is that there's a lot of literally reorganization and cleanup to do in the department, and also in the transportation area of things. And so it seems like, well, I won't say it seems, a lot of these projects are moving very slowly because there is a lot of this grind out work to do to get things back to zero. So if that's any consolation, I'll talk about that in a few minutes.
And by the way, don't read judgment into what I'm asking question.
Well, I just want to explain why.
I mean, there's
That's my
judgment, but not
explanation.
towards you.
Okay.
Just to be clear. Sure. And then the last one is, and then I'll be done. The Fremont one, page 5, the second item. That's the one involving the access to grocery outlets driveway, right?
Yes.
And so you refer to, because that's just a matter of adjusting the striping. right?
Yes.
So I was just, again, I'm goal driven and not process oriented. So when you say budget, conceptual layout, on-call professional services contract, I'm just wondering, it seems like a lot for what we're talking about, which is right. In a nutshell, what we're talking about is the access to the driveway for grocery outlet off of Fremont, south of Huntington, the east side of the street. There's a no left turn for southbound traffic into that driveway. There's also a no U-turn on Huntington at Fremont westbound, which makes it limits access to the grocery store. They expressed concerns some time ago. Director Gerber and I went out there some time ago and talked about some relatively what would seem to be easy to implement striping adjustments to allow the left turn to happen. Okay.
Yes. So I can explain. Yes, this is a relatively simple implementation, but just because of the situation we're in, it looks a little complicated on the page here. Basically, what we took a look at our staff doing the striping. It's a little bit outside of our bag, I guess you could say. So we would bring in a striping company, and that's where we already made that connection to see what this would cost. The striping company, in order for them to do the work, needs an actual plan document. We could do that in-house if we had the staff. We're hiring staff right now. It's probably faster actually to get the on-call services contractor to do it, on the order of maybe 4 to 6 weeks from now, within that time frame, versus the staff hiring process is going to take a couple more months.
On-call contractor we were talking about a few minutes ago.
It's multiple different on-call contractors for different types of services. But yeah, in this case, both traffic engineering. Yes.
Terrific. Thank you very much.
Of course.
If I might piggyback on that on the grocery outlet driveway, and this might stop me if this opens up a discussion, but part of restricting that U-turn was connected to turning on the northbound right turn arrow or the right turn overlap. And while there's volume there, I wonder if you feel the benefit of having that right turn overlap exceeds kind of the work that will be required to put in this left turn pocket or this left turn lane.
So the right turn overlap that you're referring to,
it's a northbound right turn arrow. So when that turned on, you had to restrict the U-turns around because that right turn gets served with a left turn.
Yeah, the rectangular configuration of the intersection.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think I understand its intent. However, I think that right turn was accommodated all right in the existing through movement because that's typically serving the max northbound, and the right turn kind of goes with that. And then when the left turn goes, typically right turners still kind of stop, pause, looking, and ease through the intersection.
Sure. I mean, it's our feeling that the predominant movement to get into that lot would be westbound Huntington turning south onto Fremont to get into grocery outlet. So I think it would work.
Okay. Well, I'm saying if we allowed the U-turn again, they would make a U-turn there and then make a right turn into that driveway.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's our thought that this would probably be a better solution than allowing the U-turn.
Okay.
In order to move people into the north side of the lot versus the west side, because the advantage of the right turn movement is to get people off of Fremont and onto Huntington.
Okay.
To that point, I think that was part of the whole reason was to resurrect the designated right-hand turn arrow, was to get people used to getting off Fremont and going to try to get them onto Fair Oaks,
Right.
where we're going to do the synchronization and we want to keep the trucks and get as many, the ease of getting onto Fair Oaks.
One of the, I don't know if you call this a concern, but when the southbound left turn is pretty heavy there and you don't have left turn phasing. And so a lot of times people will make that left turn on a yellow or sometimes a red during the peak hour. And so after that phase serves, the left turns on Huntington is served. So that right turn arrow comes on while people, that southbound left turn, are still trying to get out of the intersection or clearing the intersection because they're often turning on the last second of yellow or red. So it's a number of factors to
Yeah, which
consider.
is kind of
Mhm.
why we always wanted to try to do a designated left-hand turn arrow from the southbound Fremont onto Huntington, which we don't have. Because you've got the left-hand turn pocket, and you could easily, if we put in a left-hand turn designated arrow, that would help move that traffic too. Again, to make it easy for them to go left and then potentially going down Huntington or and easing that intersection.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Ted, for this. Is a wonderful, wonderful list, very comprehensive. I just do a couple things. Some of them are just a little housekeeping. On page 2, under street improvements, if it's going to be for the record, contract, not contact. And on, and then on operation and maintenance, I also had a note about, was going to bring up about the rocks on the Stone City sign, that we might have some options there. On the next page, page 4, also typo kind of requested change for next to last line under the 626 Golden Streets continues. Staff continues to release marketing materials. And then the next item under slow streets, I had a question on that. We had regarding the design and the elements of the individual sort of pocket park structures. I know we were waiting for those to come in. Do we know if we're going to get what we ordered? And then because what I also was looking at, I believe that the barricades that we have up now, the K-rails, are due to expire in August. So I don't know whether we're going to be able to, are we going to renew, will we have a transition and make sure that we're protected and the businesses are protected? Because I believe that was coming out of funding that went from the planning department at the time, but I'm not sure how the budget is being shifted or whatever, but I just want to make sure we're thinking and not going to lose or be stuck where it's the last minute. Oh my God, how are we going to pay? We need to extend the barricades if we haven't gotten in what we need for the individual protective structures as part of that program.
Sure. So the structures are being manufactured now. We expect them to be here in a few months, probably before August. So there's a couple of ways this could go. And that would be why we want to try to get this contract with Alta back in place sooner than later. Because we don't know what the ultimate destiny of the K-rails would be. So we could either continue renting K-rails through some other contractual mechanism, or we replace them, or we put something else in. So replace them or put something else in, or not have them at all. So it really depends. But yeah, we are aware of the termination of that. We utilize the rental costs for the K-rails as part of our matching funds for the Slow Streets program. So though planning was handling that, Public Works will probably handle it moving forward.
And then I also had a question on the Meridian Avenue traffic management and safety measures. One of the things I believe was asked for at a previous meeting, I believe it was Chair Fisher, one of the things was we wanted to create the website portal, and that perhaps was not the best option moving forward because of a variety of reasons. But I think there was a question of, could we look at getting kind of accident data regarding property damage, reported accidents? Because we heard a lot of examples from the community when they came in and spoke, and yet it might not be reflected in the police data. So we want to try to see if there's some way to get cognitive and specific information, accurate information, whatever we can procure about what the accident situation is and damage there is on Meridian. And when you also talked about the traffic lights, if I recall properly, as you're saying, you need to wait and get a new contract. And I understand you have to go out with that kind of contract. You have to go out with an RFP for competitive bidding. get the bids, do the reviews, go to approval, all of that. So it'll take a bit. But for, at least if I recall correctly, when we put in the signal on Orange Grove and Monterey, we had to have a source that also could coordinate with the restrictions of Metro because of it being so close to the crossing. So I just to make sure that when we do go out for a bid, that we ask and make sure that there's collaborative experience, so they know that they're going to have to work with potentially Metro on certain locations. because
Yes.
of the signals.
Yeah, it's specialized work, so there's only a handful of players in that game.
Okay.
But yes, and our the current contractor we're utilizing does that coordination for us. So it could be the same contractor. We just have to see.
And then when you're talking about getting a traffic engineer position, would that person also have the configuration design skill ability? Or are you thinking you need that design skill outside and this person is more the nuts and bolts, if you will?
Sure. So that might be a good question for our next agenda item to talk about realization, but the traffic engineer on-call component is one element. We actually, in our next time, we'll be talking about an actual staff position for transportation related items. But to allude back to some of the earlier questions about an on-call traffic engineer, that's basically for individual separate engagements that we need assistance on. For example, we were talking about that striping reconfiguration at Fremont and Huntington. That would be like it's not a one-time thing because it's essentially a master services agreement where we can call on this company over and over again, but each individual time would be an engagement that we ask that they have a particular skill set, like you're saying, for that one project.
And this might allude to, again, as you say, the
Sure.
next topic, but one of the things was as we look at that, would there be some sort of communication between whatever our in-house traffic engineer is, being made aware of when there are traffic accidents through the police department in the city or wherever, whoever gets notified or finds out, so that we can then start getting the data and having them see where we might have these dangerous situations for we could, address going forward, like some sort of collaborative, whether they get an email or when there's an accident or they get a report number or something, so that we can work together with all of our personnel to make sure we're collecting information and data that would be helpful down the line.
Yes, we haven't gotten that far yet, but that's the hope. The police department is finally implementing like a database system. We just don't know the extent of what types of reports they're gonna have in there and how accessible it is. But as it stands now, when we collect traffic data from the police department, it's basically them going through old reports and searching and then redacting PDF copies and emailing them over to us. So we're hoping for something that's a little more robust, but we haven't explored that just yet.
Thank you, Ted. Those are
course.
the questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I'll note that we were joined by Councilmember Plymouth at 7 o'clock, and for his benefit, we're still on item number 2. I had just a couple of comments, and my first was on page 3 under the Fair Oaks State Route 110 interchange loop hook on ramp. And it states here that we may have to coordinate or cost share with the city of Pasadena. And I think there's been some confusion regarding the hook ramp concept, the loop ramp concept. So going back several years ago, the hook on ramp concept was developed. A hook on ramp means you make a 90-degree turn to get on the southbound freeway. Loop means you make a 180-degree turn. Some years ago, the hook on ramp was looked upon as being possible, in that Caltrans had said, well, it may be physically possible to do so and meet the Caltrans guidelines. However, that location is a quarter to half a mile from Fair Oaks Avenue, and State Street is residentially developed in that area, not too wide. So it was never a good idea to put an on-ramp there so far away from Fair Oaks. A few years ago, we developed the loop ramp concept, which has a loop ramp basically along the frontage of the shopping center that includes Ace Hardware. And that's the plan that we were trying to advance. So I think the hook on-ramp has always been dead in the water from the very beginning, just because it would send too much traffic too far away along residential frontage. So I'm hoping at a future meeting, we can present the loop on-ramp concept, which has been tweaked and modified a little bit such that we think we can get a exception to the strict Caltrans standards. But I hope we'll be looking at that at a future meeting. So I wanted to make that clarification. On item number, on page number 4, Commissioner Hughes alluded to this regarding Meridian Avenue. We've always been quick to jump to a solution before we've identified the problem. So I think for Meridian Avenue, it's kind of a sensitive issue there, given the number of reported collisions that we've had, not confirmed, but reported by residents. And it says you're evaluating reports to determine additional improvements. I think we want to take it in 2 steps. Be very careful this time to identify the types of collisions that are occurring, and then identify the types of improvements that might address that type of collision, rather than jump to a conclusion regarding an improvement like another always stop, when maybe that may not address the situation there. So I think we wanted to be real careful here and take it in 2 steps. Those are the only comments I had here. I'm very pleased to see this list. And I think in upcoming meetings, it would be helpful to make further improvements on this list by showing some of the critical deadlines. Not deadlines, but expectations when, we expect to go to council in May for the funds for this, or we expect to complete this by August, whatever, so that we can gauge our progress in it. So I think having some dates to this would further improve the list. But again, I'm very pleased that you developed it. So thank you for that. Yes. Yes, absolutely. Sorry. Yes, I'm finished. Chamber. Aware of it, and chamber regarding the farmers market tomorrow night. I just wanted to make sure part of this process
Yes, it actually should have been listed as a separate item. I think when I was putting this together, I thought farmer's market and put it all in one item, even though there are 2 separate conceptual things, a bollard system for the protection of the pedestrians at the farmer's market, but then also separately addressing the parking and traffic along Glendon Way. And yes, there is a agreement going to council tomorrow night. You notice some changes to the agreement language with regard to Public Works's involvement in working with the Chamber of Commerce to address the traffic control plan and resulting traffic issues. So the Chamber of Commerce has already provided their traffic control plan to our staff. So as soon as we finish going through a couple other traffic control plans, that's next on our list to take a look at to see if we can make any further adjustments for Glendon Way. I think there was one change that was made already with some signage, but we have to take a look at that.
Okay, any other comments regarding agenda item number 2? Okay, with that, we'll go to item number 3, commission evaluation update.
Yes, so earlier this year, we had and I think even in last year, we had some updates about some rearrangement and consideration of the commissions at the council level. And one item that was, well, on our last council meeting's agenda, we had 2 items. One was for the reorganization of the Public Works Department, which I'll talk about one moment. And then the second was wrapping up the council's commission evaluation. So the first item, the reorganization of the Public Works Department, was a conclusion of implementing recommendations from the Public Works assessment that occurred last year by a consultant. And there was about 11 or 12 recommendations, some of which were to add staff, and one of which was to consolidate this commission with the Public Works Commission. So during this council meeting, the Public Works, we had made a recommendation to the council to make some changes to how the department is organized. And those changes you'll see in the packet here on an org chart. And primarily those changes were to consolidate the deputy director positions. There used to be 2 deputy directors in the Public Works Department. And so it's been consolidated into 1. And with the savings of that position and also reorganizing some of the staff funding sources in the department, add 2 new management analyst positions. And the reason that's important is, as we've been discussing tonight, getting contracts in place, finding grant funding, writing staff reports, not capital improvement project management, but more so program management, like we were talking about water conservation this evening. These are all roles that have gone unfilled in the Public Works Department because there isn't that level of, administrative level of staff like the management analysts. So this reorganization was approved by the council, with the exception of, you'll see sort of like a more lighter faded square on the left, which is a transportation engineer. Not that they didn't approve it, but that was part of the second item that went to council. So council had asked in February that in lieu of merging the Mobility, Infrastructure, Transportation Commission and the Public Works Commission, for staff to return with alternatives so that those commissions could remain separate and oversee their areas of responsibility, both of which are very important for the city. And so staff's recommendation was to add another engineering position to the department. So council approved that consideration of a new position. They haven't yet approved the position yet, because that position doesn't exist at the city. And there's several steps that have to happen in order for a position to be created, both working with, if necessary, working with the collective bargaining groups, establishing a position description, doing a comp and classification to establish a salary level, and then obviously doing the recruitment steps. So while 2 new positions were added, management analyst positions, and we actually started the recruitment process for those the day after the meeting, we still have work to do in order to add the transportation engineer position. And our vision for that position is not just a technical services support function in traffic related matters, but as a additional liaison to this commission and also to the general city community for transportation related projects and matters, and also to the region. Obviously, there's a lot of coordination with other cities. There's a lot of regional efforts that we try to participate in, but we just don't have the staff resources at the time to take advantage of. And so sometimes we miss out on grant funding opportunities. So this position would be solely funded by our local match Measure M and Measure R funding, which has been freed up by this organization. We intentionally moved around the positions so that we could fund that position fully. And so that's our next step with regard to the concluding the reorganization, is to come back to council requesting the addition of a transportation engineer. Hopefully that summarizes the whole concept of here, what's going on. I'll say the other element of this, also part of the public works recommendations from our consultant, is to more efficiently utilize on-call third-party consultants to assist the city. And that's that effort I talked to you about with bringing in for, under a master services agreement methodology for unique engagements where we need help, essentially. So.
Okay, we'll start from the left, Commissioner Dennis.
Thank you, Director Gerber. And I think that's exciting to see that potentially a transportation engineer we brought on board. I would just encourage that the classification be someone who's licensed or has some sort of civil license or traffic engineer license that, for those quick ad hoc things like a signal warrant or a stop sign warrant, you're not having to contract that out. Like someone on staff can do that study. And I think it's super exciting. There's a lot of money in transportation now. As you know, there's a lot of grant funding, and then you have the bipartisan infrastructure law. And so I think a lot of money's coming down that person can quote unquote build their time to, so that new position is not a burden to the general fund of the city. So yeah, I look forward. I hope this comes to fruition. It's super exciting. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
We do. You may know him, Antenna Desfaje is the acting Deputy Public Works Director. And so I'm sorry. Well, since we've consolidated that position, we've come up with a position description that takes on all of those elements that were previously divided. And so now we can start the recruitment for that position. The position description was approved and the consolidation was approved by council. I don't think so. It may or may not be, there's a couple factors in how long that process would be. Certainly for this effort, we utilized what we expected the cost and requirements for a senior civil engineer would be, which we do have. So we don't have a transportation engineer position qualification position. I don't think we have in the past. We've had various types of engineers, associate engineer, and that kind of thing. And all have been expected to have some level of transportation experience, but nothing specific like that. That also leads me back into the point that Commissioner Dunlap had made, is that currently none of these engineering positions require licensing in the city. I don't know how that's come to be over time. It's a preferred requirement, obviously, and it's an advantage to have the license for many reasons. So we'll have to see how that works out with regard to the position creation negotiation and whether that's a requirement or not. Certainly, we had a couple of thoughts about whether this is like a transportation manager or whether it's like a traffic engineer. I think transportation engineer is sort of like a placeholder for what this could be.
Okay. And what is Tatovik's position?
Tatovik was a civil engineering assistant, and she was recently promoted to the associate civil engineer,
Okay, so that's the box right below the
the
proposed new
transportation engineer.
position.
Yes.
Okay. Terrific. And the management analyst positions that are new, have we had those before? Or we have, but not this department?
That's correct. Yeah, the other departments have those positions. So it's a standard position, but not in the Public Works Department. So in fact, before this reorganization, we only have two administrative staff, Liana, who you know, and our on the operations side, Raina. And their schedules are very full with their responsibilities, as you can imagine. So it's helpful to have some additional staff to help out with some of these projects and programs.
Okay, great. Well, this is exciting, and I'm glad that you have a new vision for the department and council's on board with it. So thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Hughes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Ted. This is exciting. A couple of things. One would assume that if we are getting the two management analyst positions, that they would also be, as you mentioned, grant seeking, as well as obviously all the money that was coming out of the federal government for infrastructure, that we can try to get our fair share of that funding. And then maybe it would help also to help us understand what contract what missing components are we missing right now regarding contracts? Do we, do we have everything that we need for street repair, asphalt? Do we have, the rentals that we need? Do we have, the striping sources? Do we have any kind of, barricades you need? Should we have a water? You know what I'm saying? That it would be nice to know where are our potential holes that we need to, that you're addressing, but so that we kind of know where those potential problem areas are. And, knowing what you go out, the other is there an opportunity if we're concerned, like if you have a critical area, is it worth to go out and say, instead of just doing a whole RFP, can we do a piggyback? Could we do some other mechanism to get it? And if we did an umbrella with subs potentially, or oftentimes to create a library of sources. So they've met the recommendations of your RFP needs. You've kind of put them on a retainer, but you're not locking yourself in. So when you do have a project, you go to these 3 or 4 sources and say, here's what I want, give me a bid for it. And then it gives you some flexibility. So I don't know if those things would be helpful if there's a lot that you're wrangling with. And the last point I want to mention is we kind of talked a little bit about the projects, but I'm assuming that also the management analyst could help with some of the community outreach, because I know Vice Chair Dunlap has talked about making sure we're engaging the community as we look at all these areas, whether it's the Ramona or whether we're looking at Mission, because I don't think our public knows that what's coming down with these fabricated pieces and what we looked about beacons and all these things to make sure that the community, besides those that might be watching the commission meetings, but are made aware of what's coming and how it might impact their community or improve their community. Because some of that can also just making sure that the management analyst is writing a blurb that's going up on the website, that kind of thing. So I would hope that that would be a component that would be important to these positions to make sure that we've got that community engagement.
Yes to all of that. So, as you had mentioned, there's a lot of standard practices with regard to procurement and general administration in field and engineering operations that we would be able to implement with these management analysts. I had a long dissertation to defend this item at council the other night about all the types of different opportunities we would have if we were to add these positions. It wasn't necessary. The item passed rather easily. But to your point, there's quite a lot of things that are needed here. And as you also mentioned, you notice that this city manager's administration is very much about making sure that the public's aware of what the city is doing, that there's a very high level of transparency, and accomplishes that goal through social media tools and things like that, and calls upon all of the departments to participate. Having these positions would allow us to really get a lot more engaged, not just in what we've got going on day to day, but some of our long-term goals about projects and things like that that can be more clearly advertised and accessible on our website.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. I'll ask a few questions just to clarify the organization chart. The management analyst that reports directly to you, is that a new position or an old position that's been filled?
So both management analyst positions have not been filled yet. They're both new. So the one on the left that reports directly to me, and then the one on the far right that reports to the deputy. They're both new. The positions that are existing are the public works assistant and the management assistant that are also up in that higher level. So one change that happened in this reorganization that might not be evident because you don't have the previous chart with you is that there used to be there was 4 divisions. One of them was the administration division, which was basically Liana was the administration division.
She's everything.
Yes,
Yes.
exactly. Yes. And rely on her in that way and completely. We wanted to simplify the structure so that we actually we split the water division and the sustainability division into 2 different divisions. They have very distinct roles. So you see the right 2 columns are those divisions. And now all the administrative staff, both existing and new, will just report directly to either the director or the deputy director.
So new positions, and they've been filled or not filled yet?
They have not been filled yet. We actually just started the
Okay.
recruitment process.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Then the deputy director of public works, I understand there's not a permanent, the person filling it is not permanent yet.
Yes.
He's just acting. Is
He's
that
acting
correct?
at the moment. Yes.
And do you have a timeline when you expect to put a permanent person there?
So we're trying to fill the vacancies from the top up. So right now, we're working on some of the maintenance worker, one of the vacant maintenance worker roles. And the current position we're filling right this week is the senior civil engineer, which has been vacant always. And then the civil engineering assistant position. And then we'll move on to the public works operations manager, which we've already, we're concluding we just ended the application period, so we haven't conducted interviews yet. And then you may recall, we also have a vacancy in the facilities maintenance supervisor position. And we have a vacancy on the water side in the senior water
wow.
utility. So we're trying to rebuild the staff, and then that will probably follow with.
You've got a
deputy
lot of
position.
holes and people are doing double duty. in it.
Exactly, yes.
I understand.
Yeah.
Then on the left side of the org chart, you indicate Tatovic, who we know has filled the associate civil engineer position. Do you know if she's registered as a civil or traffic engineer?
She's almost there. She's just wrapping up her last exam. Like she just took it, so we'll know
Civil
soon.
or
Yes,
the-
civil.
Okay. Yeah, my understanding is that for naming positions, that if you say engineer, if you have the word engineer there, registration is a must for a person to call him or herself an engineer. They must be registered. So the way to get around that is what you do with your civil engineering assistant. You call it a civil engineering associate. And what is your timeline for filling the transportation engineer new position?
It's still a ways out because we haven't had, that position's not approved yet. And there's some work to do. So a lot of what you're mentioning about titling and what the position requirements, it's a bit out of, my hands. It really has to do with the position negotiations with the different, with the employee associations. So that one is pretty far out, seeing as we don't have any of that. That discussion hasn't started yet as far as the association negotiation, let alone going to council for approval.
So it's a ways out.
Yes, it really just a couple of weeks ago was given the sort of go ahead by the council to proceed in considering it.
Okay, well, that's helpful. I know probably most of us sitting at this table are a little frustrated at the progress of some projects, but we recognize the problems that have been present by not having enough staff and then having vacancies in your org chart. So when that occurs, you're just dealing with the everyday emergencies and you can't move forward. So we're really supporting you filling these positions so that these projects that we discussed under agenda item 2 can move forward. So
Thank
we
you.
wish you
Yeah,
luck on
I
that.
mean, you'll notice probably from just our agenda preparation and getting new staff reports, really, we're just trying to keep up, let alone trying to plan for the future and implement projects. So hopefully we'll get there very soon.
Understood. Any more comments on item number 3?
Mr. Chair, just a couple of quick questions. I just want to see if I can identify who some of these folks are. So the water operations manager, is that Antenna, who is temporarily the interim deputy?
Yes, so in his place, we have an acting water operations manager who is usually the senior water production treatment operator,
Okay.
and his name is Victor Magana.
So which position under the water division is the one that's vacant? You mentioned
The senior water utility worker, which we've just, I think we've just completed interviews for.
okay. And do we have an environmental services and sustainability manager?
Yes, that is RP Kasparian. She
Oh,
was
sure.
previously the water conservation and sustainability analyst.
Right.
In a previous council action, we upgraded that position to a manager.
Okay, great.
So the
And-
idea would be to eventually fill out that staff over time.
Right. Okay, that's terrific. And then the public works operations manager, you're going to start interviews for that shortly, right?
Yes, we've received all our applications and we'll start interviews.
Okay. And then I noticed there isn't a similar, and I don't have the experience that you do. There isn't a similar type position under the engineering division. Is that, can you help me understand?
In all the organizations I worked in, there has been an engineering manager, but
Oh.
it's a kind of a slim ship here. So I will double as the engineering manager in this.
That's
in
what
this
I was
scenario.
getting to.
Yes.
Okay. Great.
But the senior civil engineer will certainly have, a position where they'll be providing work direction and acting as the lead for that division.
And engineering is all aspects of public works, right? So it's whether it's transportation, water, sewer, et cetera, it's everything.
Yes, I mean,
Except for the new position that you're working on.
yeah, I mean, you could think of it, it's primarily, it's all the planning and capital improvement work, but also regulatory support for all the other divisions too, and design support, and there's a lot of aspects. I guess if you were to look at it, we tried to organize it so that obviously the water end of operations is pretty clear. It's about distribution and production. The operations and maintenance is really about supporting the city infrastructure. And so environmental services and engineering are really about supporting the community for projects, and they're very external facing, whereas the public works operations is a lot of like maintenance and things like that. If
Okay.
that helps.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
And then Tatovic, the associate civil engineer, who hopefully will get certification shortly, fingers crossed. Will she, my understanding has been that she has not had the opportunity to work on some of the matters that we brought up because she's been working on matters for basically for planning. Does that sound right? And is that continuing? And is there hope that we can get her back?
She works on some things, like, for example, she's the project manager for our Fair Oaks signal synchronization project. And she's been doing, a great job with that. That's a very difficult project. And looking towards the other phases of that project, such as the north-south ITS project, which would start, on the tail end of the Fair Oaks synchronization project. She has been doing a lot of our assisting with our plan check work. So it's kind of on the planning side, but still in public works domain. And right now she's spending a lot of time helping us get caught up on some of our private development environmental report work. So reviewing some of the multi-use projects, traffic impact analysis plans that are coming forward, among many other things. She's been handling some of the grant administration here and there as she's able to. Unfortunately for us, very close to the deadlines of some of these things because we don't have a lot of resources. So she really has her hands full on a handful of projects and a handful of routine program tasks that it's been difficult to sort of juggle other things into that.
So it sounds like to
realm.
make meaningful, and you mentioned that she's working on the Fair Oaks projects, which are major, very important projects. And thank you to her and to her, you and to her for doing that. With regard to all of these other matters, we either need this transportation engineer on board, or we need on-call third-party vendor help if we're going to move forward on a lot of these projects, because she's so stretched and strained on a lot of these other things that you mentioned. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes, I think having the management analysts on board would put us much farther forward, because a lot of the work, as you can imagine, in government is just about the procedural components of that, about procurement,
I'm
about
gathering
preparing staff
that, yes.
reports to get them to council, the grant end of things. Some of these projects are kind of like going back and forth because the grant funding is getting sorted out. And then certainly there's a lot of budget elements to those. So the technical work, there's a void there, but I'd say primarily the administrative component is there's a big need for that as well. So I think that the transportation engineer position will be more of a transportation program manager and liaison role. The technical work will probably be still lent out to the on-call consultants, like you said. But yes, to answer your question, all those elements are necessary in order for the programs to move forward. But we can continue to sort of limp along with adding the management analysts in, and then getting the on-call in to get back up to speed.
So all the pieces of the puzzle are critical.
Yes.
And in terms of implementation, it sounds like the on-call piece is a critical one on top of the critical.
Yes. I mean, just like the status updates today, all the work that you've seen that's been done in the last, 3-4 months is just by, who you see before you with between Liana and myself and Tata, because with regard to transportation matters. So it's just about expanding that and getting more done.
Thanks. Thank you, Chair.
Commissioner Hughes.
Just a quick question. Not to get everyone concerned, but I believe we're going to be coming up needing to revisit our water and sewer rates. And for the current pricing structure we have now, I believe we have the 5-year, and I think we're coming to the end of that. And I just worry that, is that going to take up a lot of time? And do we need, because we need to normally do an analysis, hire for that. Someone's got to manage all that. Then we have to come up with plans of what we would propose and how that's going to dovetail into the budgets. and revenue needed? And has
Ye-
that been?
Yes, we've
looked-
already started that process. So the rates will expire at the end of 2022. So that's why we've started now. We're starting the procurement process to bring the consultant on board to start that study so that will be done in time to implement the new rates in 2023. But, that's a good point about all the non-transportation aspects the Public Works Department has to handle in addition. So we're keeping up with those projects also.
Yeah, because also we have to remember that depending upon how you want to think about calendaring, because you need to make sure you've got your community engagement, but you don't want the community engagement the same, just like if you're doing all that, the same time you might want to be having meetings on mission transportation. Do you know what I'm saying? That we have to kind of look at the calendar and start planning out those communiques and the important projects and what we're going to be presenting to the public in a timely and informative manner.
Yes, so, a lot of the schedule for some of the things that we're talking about, the things we've been talking about these last couple of months and even tonight, about when things come to council is considered in that. So the city manager and the deputy city manager have been very good about organizing all of the departments' schedules in terms of requests of the public for community engagement and of the city council to try to not, do too much at once. It might not seem that because we have council meetings that go very late, but that's because there's so much to do. But it is organized. We've sort of staggered elements. Like we won't have much on the agenda. Tomorrow night, we had a lot on the agenda this past time, and then we'll come back onto the agenda probably the following time, just to try to manage that as you're mentioning.
Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you for that. And thank you, Ted, for the evaluation update of the commission and of your organization chart. With that, we go to agenda item number 4, our only action item today. And that is for the approval of the minutes. I hope you all had a chance to review the minutes. And are there any modifications, editorial changes that anyone would like to make before we have a motion to approve the minutes?
Mr. Chair, just a quick thing for
Yes.
consistency on last page, just under the time frame, staff communications from to add, so it's consistent. So we have the PM, AM with periods because we have it with the periods on the line below.
Okay, and I don't know which is correct, but that's fine for consistency.
Deanna, whichever way you want to do it, but just so we're consistent.
Okay,
And that's it, Mr. Chair.
okay. Are there any other editorial changes? Chair, or excuse me, Commissioner
We're
Abels.
living in the past here,
Yeah.
Bishop. Thank you. Sorry, of course I was teasing. Deanna did a great job incorporating my suggested changes already. So I think they're great. I was just something, it was my mistake when I submitted them to her and I've lost it again. Oh, yeah. Item 9, 1, 2, 3, 4th paragraph. First line, it's just a typo. It was on my end. Commissioner Abelson commented on the reduction of speed limits, not speeds limits. Just taking out the S, incredibly small, but you see where I'm,
Yeah,
okay,
Yep.
duly noted.
just that. But other than that, they're great for me.
Okay. All right. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes as amended.
Mr. Chair, I would so move approval of the amended minutes.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, it's unanimous. And that takes us to the city council liaison communication.
Good e-
Councilman Prima.
Good evening, everyone. I'll just be brief. We do have a council meeting tomorrow in which we are on the consent calendar, expected to look at the renewal of the farmer's market contract with the Chamber of Commerce. And I did look at some of the language in light of the commissioner's question and answer on parking. And so we'll make sure that Public Works, which is taking an active role in working with the chamber on parking issues, that they're paying attention to that particular area. The transportation engineer, I'm really excited to see that. When the senior staff reported to council about reorganizing the commission structure, there was a proposal to combine MTIC with Public Works. And one of the pushbacks among the council members, including me, was that we value the collaborative expertise of our community. And if it's a drain on staff time to be here supporting the commissions, we want to make sure that there's enough staff time to support that. And so, off the top of my head, I said, is there a commission support specialist that we could hire? Someone who actually can get in there and do the legwork to make sure materials, concerns, minutes, notices are all being done. And so the technical staff doesn't have to do that. There's no such thing as a commission support specialist, but transportation engineer is, I think, one of the positions that, with a bunch of other amalgamated job descriptions, is going to fulfill that role. And one of the comments from the council was, if it takes a little bit more money to provide the staff to support our existing commission structure, then so be it. I had in mind particularly this commission because I've been very impressed with the level of the depth of analysis, the technical knowledge that you all have. And we are so much better as a council having your input and having you vet and improve ideas. So as much as I admire our director for being here today, and I hope that'll continue, and having him at the top of the agenda with updates, I think is critical briefing for all of you so that you can do your job supporting the council. So with this addition, and you heard from Ted that there's a lot of other functions that this person will perform. And really it's all about collecting information, synthesizing information, making sure we're connected, making sure we're tracking everything we need to track, and that all of our collaborative pieces are being coordinated together. So that's kind of the investment that we're making with this position. I anticipate it will go forward.
Great, thank you. And with that, we'll go to item number 6, Commissioner Communications. We'll start with Vice Chair Dunlap.
All right. I'll follow up on one of Commissioner Abelson's communications last month around AB 43. I think we will see a number of jurisdictions kind of moving forward to implement the aspects of that around speed limits. So just want to keep that in the back of your mind of how opportunities there are in the city to revisit some of the posted speeds. On a more fun note, I'm excited that 66 Golden Streets is coming up May 1st, and I hope that Ted and his staff update can kind of give us some update on what to expect there. Sounds like they should have a job fair there while we have 10, you know what I mean? Like, what, 10,000, however many thousand people there, why not have a big booth that says, hey, come work for the city of South Pasadena? I think it's probably a pretty good city to work for, but yeah, I hope everyone can make it out to that. And I hope it's looking forward to it and hoping it's a super fun day.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Abelson.
Thank you, Chair Fisher. So my notes are a little more somber. I wanted to, well, thank you, Vice Chair Dunlap, for bringing up the AB 43 issue. It would be great if that's something we could take advantage of down the road. I wanted to bring up we've talked a lot tonight about the status of projects and the progress that has or has not been made and the concerns. So I don't want to beat the proverbial dead horse, but I wanted to make a couple of notes. So first, I've brought up a number of times, both during our meetings and then otherwise, how important I think it is and Director Gerber talked about the city manager's desire for transparency and keeping the community apprised of what's going on. I think it is beyond critical that the community be aware of commission meetings. And if you're subscribed to the WISPA list, they do a fantastic job every week of listing every single commission meeting with links to the agendas. It's fantastic. This city does not do it. So it would be fantastic. And if I should just direct it to the city manager, I can do that too, but I wanted to just remind the group and Director Gerber, maybe the next time he has an opportunity, it would be fantastic if the city could, whether it's the City Hall Scoop or I think it's the Neighborhood Pulse, I think that's what it's called. The city has a few different platforms and missives that go out to the community about what's going on in town, which is fantastic. And it would be great if we could also be letting the community know, not that, dozens are going to come to our meetings, but it'd be nice for people to know that different commissions are meeting in case they have an interest or want to bring something up. Because that's part of our function, I think, is also to take in comments and input from the community and discuss it with staff and maybe they percolate up to the council if necessary. So that's that. The other is I wanted to just express, and I know I'm often the squeaky wheel, how frustrated I've been. And it's clearly a complex problem and has nothing to do with anybody in this room about the lack of progress. And all of us have spent dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of hours working on a lot of different projects, both operational, capital, almost $100 million in grant funded projects with Measures M, R, and the Fremont Avenue ATP. And it becomes very frustrating to not see any forward movement. And there are a lot of reasons for it, and it's not one person's fault, but it would be fantastic if we could get support starting at the city council level and the city manager's office to devote as many resources as we can to moving forward. And I think Director Gerber's done an incredible job in getting us on the right track. But I think it's really important. And I sort of feel sometimes like transportation management, operations, and traffic sort of it's sort of like it's second fiddle to a lot of other things that may be a lot more exciting or controversial. But I think it's critical that the city get its arms around these projects and start moving forward. And it's also painful when I see other cities around us, right, repaving streets, implementing slow streets and all these, and implementing neighborhood traffic management, and we're stuck. So anything and everything that everyone can do to shake things loose would be most appreciated. Finally, on a happy note, I want to thank Director Gerber and Liana for their tireless work. And Liana's been here longer than I have, and I've been here long.
Since the
and-
very beginning.
Since the very beginning, the Public Works Commission original days.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate it, and I appreciate your efforts to get more folks on board to help us start moving forward. And whatever we can do, and I know it's like with every question I ask, whatever we can do to get anything moving, even if it's incremental or phased, to show some progress, boots on the ground, so to speak, would be really, really fantastic. I think people would get a sense that the city is working for them. And I think sometimes people get frustrated that they don't see much happening. So anyway, sorry to bring it up, but I just, it's been there for a while and I wanted to get it out and share it. So anyway, thanks to everybody. And thank you, Chair Fisher.
Okay, now we'll go to Commissioner Hughes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to echo and thank Ted and Leona for all their work. Ted, we've been through a number. I think I've lost count of how many public works directors have been part of this ongoing process, but sort of also to echo what Commissioner Abelson says, that maybe to get, because people look at the city and think that they sacrificed a lot over the years to fight the 710 freeway. And in doing so, they felt like maybe I'm not getting my street, money's going for the big picture. But after that got settled, I kind of think, well, wait a minute, what happened? Why are my streets the same way they were 30 years ago? We actually had a commission meeting a number of years ago where a constituent, a resident came in and emptied gravel in front of us and said, that's my street. That's most of my street. So I think, and I know the street improvement, you've got it listed here and looking, but those are things that people see immediately. They're not going to see the light synchronization for a while, and they're certainly not going to see the loop ramp. But to get some of those street projects, even the slurring and some of that stuff done, I know we've been behind and we've been catching up, but that would be great to get some of that, really completed and out there so that people can see the progress. I think would be really great. And I also wanted to comment on looking forward as we look at the city as a whole, that we still need to kind of look at those projects that are coming down the pike. And I know it's alluded to in here, but the development projects again, because as we look at, and you mentioned the farmer's market, right there on Mission is the whole development that's still coming in 2 phases. We've got the Chang property that's going to be all developed, and then we have the Caros property that's going to be developed. And that's very close to parking and where the farmer's market and how that's going to impact. And don't know exactly where those, I know planning is probably looking at, but where the egress, ingress, how it's going to be so that we can kind of think big picture. And we know that the school district property, so again, we can start thinking about how all of these things are going to come together. And I know we talked about it, but it'd be nice to kind of see some plans or preliminaries and kind of look at it and think about it, because it's also going to affect the general plan and how we want to look at Mission Street as a whole. So I'd like to just put that out there as something to really put on our radar that we start looking at in a tangible way. But I know there is a lot, and it's exciting to see this org chart. And they were making progress on hiring. That's wonderful. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll just make a couple of comments. I think earlier there was a question regarding how often do you look at the collision reports, or do you get copies of collisions as they occur, et cetera. And I think you indicated there wasn't a system in place for that. But I know there is a system in place when you review speed limits. And under the guidelines that have existed for many years, you review the speed limits either every 5 years or 7 years, I think in some cases up to 10 years, but you can review it. And in my experience working with the city of LA, that was your opportunity to take a holistic look at the collision history, because you have to analyze collisions, where they occurred, what type occurred, and you look at the collision rate based normalized for volume, and you compare it with what is expected at, on certain collector streets, secondary streets. And I know the county has quite a good system of identifying expected rates. And if it's not within the norm of that, you would say, well, there's a high rate here. We need to consider reducing the speed limit. And you can do that prior to AB 43. One of my concerns about AB 43 is that you may not have to take another look at the speed limit for up to 14 years, if I understand correctly. So I think that's a major flaw. And quite frankly, it's a political way to get around looking at speed limits. That was one comment. The other comment I wanted to make was that Vice Chair Dunlap and I had a very constructive meeting with Public Works Director Gerber a couple of weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago. And our purpose of the meeting was to look at how can we streamline our meeting. We realized that you've got a full-time day job, and then you have to come to the commission meeting where you probably get other assignments. And we wanted to see how we can streamline that. So I think what we've seen with this agenda, even though we didn't really have an action item on today's agenda, was that one, we would get the project listing which you've developed, which is very helpful. And it helps us to focus on projects. We know the status, so we don't have to ask, and you don't have to go through all 28 items. So that's one thing. We have this. And I'm hoping that any comments we made today on the projects, we won't have to repeat at the next meeting. So I think that was one of the things that we discussed. The second thing that we discussed was on any agenda item, there has to be a report. It could be one page, it could be one paragraph, but in some prior meetings, we would have an agenda item with a cover page, but no recommendation or no discussion. So I think that helps having that summary, like you've done here for the commission update and evaluation and the org chart composition. I think just having that page and the org chart was very helpful. So we determined that we're always going to have at least a discussion page. And for any action item that comes to us, we're asking for the staff to make a recommendation to us. Otherwise, if, like in prior meetings, if we didn't have a recommendation, we can go off in all sorts of directions with our, with what we might think. So we're hoping those things will streamline the meeting. And also for us to keep our commissioner comments to within 3 minutes. And if we've made a point on something, not repeat that at another meeting. So we're hoping that that will reduce the time. And my goal as chair is to keep each meeting under 2 hours. Now we've gone 93 minutes thus far on this one, but the expectation is that we will be done within 2 hours. And so I think that was a positive step forward, and we're looking forward to having more streamlined meetings. Okay, with that, do we have any comments from staff?
Thank you, Chair Fisher. Just to start, so we've captured all of your comments tonight, so we can certainly start to address the ones that require action for future meetings or future concerns, particularly about making sure that we are advertising these in a more robust way to the community. I know we had talked about that previously, but we just have to make sure that's part of our routine process. But we have a process in place that we can tap into for that. So I was going to discuss just really briefly the 626 Golden Streets Mission to Mission event. Thank you for bringing that up, Vice Chair Dunlap. So yeah, the event is this Sunday. We will, and I say we, it'll be the city, all the cities working with the San Gabriel Valley COG and active SGV to facilitate the event. We'll actually start the setup in the very wee hours of the morning. You can expect the street closure to take place around 6 a.m. And then I believe this event starts at 9 a.m. to have the streets closed. We have as a city, we have a limited role in it. We're basically providing public safety services. And then we'll have our public works staff on hand to assist, but a lot of the work is being done by the COG and their contractor, particularly the traffic control setup and takedown. But there, yeah, it should be a lot of fun. I'll be there. Some of the staff will be there. There's, from what we understand, there's going to be there's a couple hubs along the route. And there's going to be different types of vendors and like, for example, along Mission, I know there's some blow up type things that the COG is putting there. And then just, what you would expect from a cyclovia type event, open streets that you can come out with your bike or other types of wheels or walk or run. There is a sponsored run that's part of it. And, I have a limited amount of information to give you about the recreational component of it because I've been focusing on the functional operational component of it. But there's a lot of information on the 626 website if you're interested in participating. So it should be a fun fun weekend, preceded by the Eclectic Music Festival on the day before.
Thank you.
And I think it's May 1st, right? Not this Sunday.
Yes, May 1st, Sunday. Yeah, that's right.
Just a couple quick questions. Thank you for that. Do you happen to know what the website is? I'm sure.
Yeah, I think it's 626goldenstreets.com. I can double check that.
And do you happen to know which streets in South Pasadena will be closed?
Yeah, in South Pasadena will be Mission from Mission Meridian to Marengo and then Marengo South.
Mission Meridian, that's where it starts.
Yes.
And it's from 9, and the closure is 9 a.m. Is that what you said?
Well, the event is 9 to 4, but I think the closure starts at 6 a.m. and then I think it's wrapped up. I don't remember 5 or 6 p.m. Because we have to clean up the street.
And if we wanted to see you, where would you be?
All over. I'll probably be at the
Hiding
hub.
under a rug or-
I'll probably be at the hub for some of the time and then just sort of walking around. But
And the hub is that Mission Meridian Star? Is that
Yes.
it? Okay. Okay, great. That sounds exciting. Yeah, thank you.
thank you.
Okay, before we adjourn, I'd like to correct something I said. And I said that a hook ramp is a 90-degree turn and a loop is 180. Well, it's really, a hook is 180 and a loop is 270. Think about it, but not too much. With that, Leona, do we need a motion to adjourn? We do not. Okay. We have concluded all of our 7 agenda items, so I declare the meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.